Welcome to Cultural Connections Lab. I'm your host, Dr. Kelly Forbes. We are here to talk with educational professionals around the world to impact and influence the education system as we focus on cultural connections and the education of multilingual, diverse students. We're excited to have you join us today, and we sincerely hope that you enjoy the show.
Are you ready to take your school district to new heights? Introducing Ed.D, the leading software as a service platform for Title III and multilingual support in education. At Ed.D, we understand the importance of equitable education and empowering multilingual learners to thrive in today's classrooms. Our cutting-edge technology provides school districts across the nation with the tools they need to enhance language acquisition, foster inclusivity, and improve academic outcomes. With seamless implementation and comprehensive support, Ed.D ensures a smooth transition for your district, empowering educators to provide targeted instruction and personalized support. So why wait? Unlock the potential of your school district today with Ed.D. Visit our website at edduskillsllc.com or call us now at 405-879-9898 to schedule a demo. Ed.D, transforming education one student at a time.
Welcome to another episode of Cultural Connections Lab with your host, myself, Dr. Kelly Forbes. I am so excited to be with you all today, as well as with our awesome co-host and from the sponsoring organization of Ed.D, Dr. Jeffrey Taylor Tribble. I am excited to be with a huge pioneer in the field of bilingual and multilingual education, here to introduce our guest, Dr. Joel Gómez. Dr. Joel Gómez is the President and Chief Executive Officer for the Center for Applied Linguistics. He holds an Ed.D in Higher Education Administration from the George Washington University. He received his Master's in Latin American Studies from the University of Texas of Austin, where he go University of Texas Austin, where he also completed doctoral work in applied linguistics and foreign language education studies. He received a BA in liberal arts with Spanish and history as a focus from the University of Texas at Austin. With a proven management style that empowers and motivates, Dr. Gómez brings a wide range of experience in research, policy, and practice in equity, language, and education to the Center for Applied Linguistics from his work in higher education, the private, for-profit sector, and public education. Dr. Gómez joined Cal from the George Washington University, where he held a joint appointment as a faculty member and chair of the Department of Education Leadership, and where he was also served as Associate Dean for Research from the Graduate School of Education and Human Development. Dr. Gómez's areas of expertise include bilingual and bicultural education, higher education, national online information centers, and federal funding of education research and development. He has also worked at the international level as an evaluator and technical assistance provider in countries such as India, Pakistan, Macedonia, Dominican Republic, among others. Before George Washington University, Dr. Gómez served as Vice President for Computer and Clearinghouse Operations in a small for-profit business, as well as Project Director on sponsored projects. As Vice President, he assisted in competing for and supporting a variety of information clearinghouse-sponsored projects, including the National Clearinghouse for Bilingual Education, among others. Dr. Gómez began his career in education by teaching at the middle school and elementary grades. In this capacity, he taught first, second, and sixth grades in 2 school districts in South Texas. Following his elementary school teaching experience, Dr. Gómez taught undergraduate courses in the Department of Romance Languages at Pan American University, where he taught beginning Spanish courses for Spanish speakers, along with courses in Peninsular and Latin American literature and Spanish applied linguistics. Dr. Joel Gómez has served as president and treasurer of the National Association of Bilingual Education and is a founding member of the Mexican and American Solidarity Foundation, a multi-million entity funded by the government of Mexico. Following his time at Pan American University, Dr. Gómez worked at the Texas Education Service Center, where he led various efforts, including serving as Director of Federal Programs in Title I, Migrant Education, and Bilingual Education. And related to these efforts, he also served as Regional Director for a national Spanish curriculum development project, focusing on language arts, social studies, science, math, and the fine arts. Also is a director of a Tri-State Education Technical Assistance Center and director for a national assessment and curriculum project in bilingual education. It is truly an honor and a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Joel Gómez. Bienvenido.
Sí, señor. Muchas gracias. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me, and I look forward to having a good, robust, and fun conversation.
I'm really excited. It's been a little bit surreal, if I'm being completely honest with you, to be able to meet you, having my master's degree in bilingual education and TESOL, as well as another master's degree in leadership and administration, and bringing that to the forefront of that master's degree. And then just most recently completing my dissertation, focusing on the role of cultural proficiency and what that plays.
Wow.
And so much of the work that you have been pioneering and leading, of course, along with other researchers and educators in the field, but truly from the Center for Applied Linguistics and you yourself, and taking that into my work and what I've been doing, it's just incredible to get to meet someone that I just see as a role model in my life. And it's funny because you've never known me, and I feel like I've known you for so long, but I'm glad that I finally had the honor and privilege to meet you.
Well,
truly.
Thank you. And it's also a pleasure to meet you and to get to know more about you. And congratulations on your doctorate. So you're very young, so you probably just finished. So can you just tell me what was your dissertation topic?
Yeah,
I'd like to know what that is, because it's a good start for a conversation.
Yeah, definitely. So for my research, I was really focused on the role that cultural proficiency plays in supporting and providing an equitable education for all students, and what that really looks like. And so a lot of my research, the framework that I used was from Lindsay and Lindsay, looking at the conceptual framework for culturally proficient practices and identifying what barriers there might be, also what guiding principles there are, unhealthy and healthy practices, and then those 5 standards and the elements of what that looks like to institute cultural proficiency and culturally proficient practices in the education sector, and even beyond, and what that looks like, and just how we sometimes behave, and also sometimes in ways that we create policy, and also in ways that impacts our pedagogical practice, the inclusivity of our students, their languages, their cultures, and who they are and their identities.
Wow, well said.
Thank you.
No, that's awesome. So having said that, one of my interests is always starting out with parents. Parents. Let's just say a parent, a mother, a father, a parent is a kid's first teacher. They learn from the parent. They learn from typically the mother, the father, the caregiver. So, and I think that is so important in all of the work we do, whether it's educating kids who speak only one language, or kids that speak several languages, or bilingual. So in your case, in your study, what would you say could be like, a few takeaways for parents based on your findings? So if you were going to talk with parents, what would you tell them about the result of your dissertation study that would help them with the education of their children?
I love that you asked that question. It's definitely recognizing the assets that you bring, the font of knowledge that you bring, ensuring that. I think the very first recommendation would be to just make sure that you are solid in understanding in who you are and proud of that, and that you allow yourself to celebrate that. Because I feel like oftentimes that we can be put into different silos, or we can be othered, or we can be whatever that group is, whenever the reality is that we all are bringing assets to the table. The beginning of this country was not English speaking and, monolithic in any way. And so there's a whole diversity there that has really transformed and changed in the field of education. So for parents, it would be to just ensure in yourself and in your child that you are your child's first teacher.
Yeah.
You are bringing a wealth of knowledge and understanding and background and culture and tradition. And like I said, identity to that table, which is going to help your student, your child learn more than just language and more than just content, but also about life. My main direction, I think, would be trying to help leaders in the educational sector to come to an understanding, to be able to try to not just understand, but really go beyond that and conceptualize this. And how do we create not just advocacy, but allyship and interconnected cultural awareness, responsiveness, just connectivity overall in a way that benefits all of us. We're always better through our diversity than we are not.
Yeah. So,
Dr. Gómez, if I might interject ask you to highlight, just based on the limited experience and background I have with you, I know you have a really amazing story about your family. And so you're asking about family, if you don't mind touching on impact your parents and specifically telling us about your grandmother and the impact that she had on you and your life growing up.
Sure. Like Kelly and I have been discussing, children learn their first lessons from the parents and the caregivers and the entire family and their community. So they come to school already like with at least 5 years worth of knowledge accumulation. And so the important thing is to have educators in providing formal education opportunities for these kids to have an open mind about what the kids are bringing, just like you were saying, except that they do have a lot to that already intersects with what happens in school.
Yeah.
So for example, Taylor asked me about my grandmother. Well, sure. My family typically, my family has been in what is now the United States since the late 1600s, around 1690, 1700, in the Southwest, for example, in what is now the Southwest. Depends what your point of view is. Your point of reference,
Mexico.
Right? Yeah,
Mexico, yes.
Right. Well, no,
Texas.
Yeah. And so one of the things that occurred while I was growing up is I spent a lot of time with my grandmother because. I'm from the kind of like the World War II era, and my father was in the armed forces, and I was kind of like a World War II baby, and I spent a lot of time with my grandmother. So I learned a lot from her. There was the tons of knowledge that you were talking about. And one of the things that occurred was that my grandmother would I would beg her to tell me folk tales every night. Now, back then, as my children don't understand, my grown-up kids don't understand, there was no network TV. There was, a matter of fact, no TV. and where I'm from, there was no network radio either. And as a matter of fact, maybe there wasn't even electricity. And there was no, running water either. So it was, even though I was born in this century, but I was living kind of like in a previous century. And so I would beg my grandmother to tell me a folk tale. In English, we might say a fairy tale, but there's a little bit of a difference between a fairy tale and a folk tale. So every evening I would say, hey, cuéntame un cuento. No, hijito, estoy muy cansado. No, tell me a story. No, I'm very tired. But anyhow, I would always prevail, and she would tell me. So there were a large number. There was a large body of folk tales she had access to. The wonderful thing is that again, there were only battery powered big boxes that had a power that had an antenna on the roof for radios, and they made those funny noises before you could get a station. So it wasn't like my grandmother had learned the folk tales by listening to soap operas. There was no soap operas back then. There was no radio stories either. So where did you get those folk tales? And well, she learned them from one generation to another generation to another generation. And the phenomena of folk tales is worldwide. They exist all over. And of course, in English, we have Anderson's folk tales, for example. So I learned a lot. What was one of the important things? Well, it wasn't that just they were entertaining. The folktales encounter allowed me to engage with a mentor, an adult I trusted, and it wasn't just entertaining. It was focusing my attention. It disciplined my ability to listen, my ability to pay attention to themes, to characters, to character development. There was all kinds of literary imagination. So one of the stories talked about, let's say, llanos de cristal y torres de marfil. Just think about that, Kelly. Llanos, ¿dónde vive el príncipe? En el palacio, en los llanos de cristal. Wow. Y torres de marfil. Wow, just think about that, and you're 2, 3, 4, 5, and you're listening to your grandmother talk about this place that she's never seen, that she can't explain what it is. Llanos de cristal. ¿Qué es? Abuela, ¿qué son los llanos de cristal? Hijito, pues no sé, pero me imagino que ha de ser como algo de cristal.
Yeah.
Y torres de marfil, were they very tall? And how were they made out of marfil, And so you learn all of this, you imagine, just like you're saying, Taylor, you imagine all these things. So I come to school with all this knowledge. And after one reporting period, I'm 30 out of 30.
We were just having that conversation.
I was ranked 30 academically out of 30 because I went to a private parochial school that was only taught in English. And so there was no room made, or there was no opportunity for me to express what I knew at all. And so that's kind of like one of the experiences that the experience that you're talking about, the body of knowledge, the community body of knowledge that kids bring to school. But the story doesn't end there. I went on and majored, as you were saying, in Spanish, and then did master's in Latin American studies. And then went on and did doctoral work in applied linguistics in Spanish and English and language education. And so in one of my classes, I was taking a Spanish class, graduate course, in all of the works of Cervantes, except Quixote. Because Cervantes wrote a lot of, not a lot, but he had several novels and novelettes.
Don Quixote.
Yeah, right. And so one of the novels that Cervantes novelettes that he wrote was Pedro de Urdemales. Pedro de Urdemales. Pedro full of trickery, mischief. Yeah. And I thought, wow. I know that. That was one of my folk tales that my grandmother recounted when I was growing up. I knew Pedro de Urdimales from my grandmother's lap. And here I am learning about Pedro de Urdimales and Cervantes in a graduate course at the University of Texas, one of the better universities in the country.
I can't deny that.
Another shout out to UT in Austin, yes.
So you can see, how that what kids bring to school can be so important that it's great to have a formal school system be receptive and accepting of what kids and encouraging of what kids can contribute when they come to school.
And correct me if I'm wrong, your grandmother was not formally educated. Is that correct?
Yeah, of course. My grandmother never had the opportunity to attend public education at all. So
I remember you saying she's like one of the smartest people that you have ever known.
She was a matriarch.
Yeah.
She was not literate in Spanish, and she couldn't read in Spanish, and she couldn't read in English, and she even didn't do math very well, or she didn't have the concept of like addition, multiplication, etc. So once I got a little bit of education, I got uppity. I know more than you, Grandma.
Yeah.
So I would say, so Grandma, ¿cómo sabes si todas las gallinas están en el gallinero? How do you know if all the chickens are in the chicken coop if you can't count them? And you say, oh, muchacho grosero. She said, crees que sabes mucho. You think you know a lot.
Yeah.
He says, of course I know the chickens are. How can I not know if the chickens are in the chicken group? He says, the one with a red crest, the one with a broken beak, the one with a white wing, the one with a red leg. Of course. She says, so she used classification skills. Mm-hmm. And that in itself is so important because when we come to school, it's kind of like we narrow down the body of knowledge that we're taught. So the only way to do math is to count 1, 2, 3. So I don't know if you ever tried to count anything that's moving, like chickens or dogs or cats or people. And you say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, no, did I count that already? 1, 2, 3. Oh, did I count that? 1, 2, 3. I don't know. There's too many things. I can't really count them. I really don't know. This is an estimate. But if you're using classification skills, you blink, you take a picture, and you can see what's there and what's not there.
A
and
skill
what should
elementary
be there.
principles need.
Well, and going back to your question to Kelly, I think we still today have many parents who come to us with limited formal education.
Yeah.
How do you suggest, with your experience with your grandmother, that schools engage parents that, unfortunately, to your point, sometimes people look down on and think they don't know things when they really do? So how do schools get families with limited formal education involved in the system?
Right. Well, I think that we can explore several avenues. That was I forgot who was interviewing whom, and so I thought I was interviewing Kelly.
That's what I was starting to think it's turning into.
So I was going to ask Kelly, as a principal, what you had experience in dealing with parents and. So based on, I was going to ask you, based on your dissertation study, what would you recommend to principals about how to basically open that metaphorical door for parents to really be included and be inclusive within the formal education process? And so Taylor, I don't know if there's any silver bullet for that. I can recount. Also, that after my experience in the parochial school, I moved on to my neighborhood school, and it was mostly a kid from the community, and it was very community oriented. The school was very community. In other words, the school was almost like a community center. So if somebody was celebrating a wedding anniversary, they would go and have their party, their dance, whatever, in the school setting. And there were all these rules that you have to sign all these papers and all that paperwork that you got to do now. So the school was the center for community life. So we needed uniforms for basketball, the parents, the grandparents, the cousins, madrinos, padrinos, las madrinas, los padrinos would all come together and have a tamalada. They would make tamales, and then they would sell, and then they would raise money for the uniforms. So there was a lot of activities going on between the community and the school. It wasn't like the school is for formal education processes that are going to be evaluated through standardized tests. And the community is a place that incubates the kids and sends them to school, and they're two separate places. So the idea of trying to still make the school setting a little bit more welcoming to making the school a part of the life of the community life. And even in saying that, I realize how that could be difficult, because now, so for example, we have a school district here that can spend, from the middle of where the school is, can go 50 miles in each direction. And there's other schools that almost cover the entire state, So how do you develop a community spirit? And so those are some of the challenges, but, there are solutions out there that are kind of interesting that we don't talk very much about. I kind of like since I grew up in that environment where my grandmother was very much accepted in school. Teachers and school personnel would go out and say, "Ay, doña Paulita, qué gusto de verla. Pásele, ¿cómo está? Tómese un café. Good to see you. Come on, let's have some coffee." And, an embrace and, a chit chat y cómo está la familia. And, of course, we don't have sometimes those kind of opportunities in school right now, because everything is very scripted and everything is very formal and there's no time and there's all kinds of things that need to be done. But I like the idea of exploring how what the benefit is of community-based schools, where we accept society is very diverse. We accept maybe parents don't have the flexibility, the freedom, the economic means to do what my grandmother could, which was just to spend time in the schools. Maybe the parents need to be working. They need to be work during the day. They need to be working at night. So how do we develop that feeling, that ownership, that partnership? I think it needs to have that partnership. How do we do that? Well, there's, I'm not an expert in community-based schools. I know very little about it, but what I've read is that it sounds like awesome in that they're kind of built to accommodate society as it is, not as it should be, not as it, was. So you develop a school where a community school where maybe kids can come in as early as 6:30 in the morning. Maybe kids can stay at the community school till 9:00 at night. And this is not an ideal that I'm talking about. There are schools that are out like that. And within your school, you have combined services. You combine health. You combine health activities, recreation activities, academic activities. You have a library. You have maybe social workers that can work with kids. You have opportunities for kids to participate in extracurricular activities with mentors. You go beyond just you try to provide job opportunities for the community as paraprofessionals that are part of the community, that know the families, know the kids. So that might be something that might help, because right now it's still, we haven't gotten away from the what we talk about many times, which is the assembly line process. Kelly, you go to Kelly for this thing, you go to Taylor for something else, you go to Joel for something else, and every time you go to each person, you get stamped, and it's all very processed. But there's no sense of community. There's no empathy. There's no ownership. It's just a process and outcomes at the end of the year, and we see where that's gotten us. Mm-hmm. We're not doing well. I mean, all I have to do is, if we got on a plane every day and we didn't know whether And the pilot was like our education system, or the airline was run like our education system. And, you might not know whether you're going to land or not. That wouldn't be allowed. And so the tragic thing is that when kids go to school and we don't behave like it's high stakes for them, not for the teacher, not for the school district, not for the state, but it's high stakes for the student, that if they don't have a positive learning experience in partnership with the community and the school, that's it. The plane wrecked. They're not going to have the opportunities that other kids have. So anyhow, those kind of things are interrelated. So the question is, what would I recommend in terms of how to address the partnership between family and schools? So that's one. I probably can talk a lot about it, but just one thing though. So suppose you don't have a community school. What do you do? I mean, what do you really do? Well, there's things like we have community reps that help create relationships with community. Maybe we need more of them. Mm-hmm. Maybe we need maybe we can have a community school, but maybe the school districts need to change their bus routes and schedules.
Going out into the community.
Right, exactly.
So it's going out the community to come to.
Exactly.
You've done a lot of that in some of your schools, haven't you, Kelly? Kind of going out and meeting them where they are.
Yeah, trying for sure. There's so much to unpack there, and I love this conversation because it's personal to me in the aspect whenever you're talking about your experiences with your grandmother, for example, or your mother, your family. My grandparents are my best friends in the entire world. Yep. They're currently 90 years old, both of them. September 91 for my grandfather and December 91 for my grandmother. Wow. And I'm just so thankful to still be learning from them and having my two best friends with me. Yep. So I can definitely relate to that feeling of hearing a folk tale or the fairy tale even, or just the stories of the past and what that did for me and what that meant for me. I also consider that my grandmother used to always talk to her grandmother and say their prayers in German and read the Bible in German. And as my grandmother, who I was tongue-tied when I was younger. And so instead of granny, it was Kiki. Instead of grandpa, it was papa. So Kiki and papa. Right. But Kiki, therefore, would tell me these stories about how she would always be able to talk to her grandmother in German, which whenever you're speaking your first language, typically there's a different emotional connection to that as well. So then that's a whole different layer to what this feeling is, apart from just the communication side that is oral, written, whatever communication, but also thinking about what does that feel like whenever you have that emotional connection? Well, the education system, because it was only in English, therefore took away that part. Yeah. And so then she lost the ability to have those conversations in German with her grandmother. Right. That connects so much to what I feel like is missing in the understanding of what we could be doing in our education system as well, because there is not just the communication side, but that emotional side, right? And so understanding and assuming that we do have students that are coming with these funds of knowledge and all of these great experiences, and going back to the question that was posed, there is no silver bullet necessarily, like you said, but the number one thing that I could consider is that I have to recognize that I don't know anything. like Socrates said, all I know is that I know nothing. And the more that you start to learn more, the more you start to recognize how much you just don't know, which is the great journey of continuous learning and just being open, right? But I think that it takes a leader in a school has to be willing to say, hey, all right, I'm going to go ahead and get through accreditation processes and policies and do what we're supposed to do, et cetera. But that's not the point of school. That's a very managerial side. Right. So I want to come into this as a servant leader. I also want to come at this wherever I listen and I learn from you, where where I sit back and I do this with you, not for you. I'm not trying to fix anyone or do anything. We have a game to play and we're going to win at that game. We got standards to teach. Sure, we can do that. But school is way more than just that, because every single person that you're educating is someone's baby, is someone's child, is a little small human that is coming in just like you did. 30 out of 30, you said, but yet you were already on a college level with abstract works from Don Quixote, right? And so, considering that, you also have to think about what does that look like, especially whenever you have some schools that can be community schools, and you have other schools that are going to be so huge that it's not necessarily like that. Right. So, what does I'm not an expert in this either, but in my research and in reading, I consider the role of collective impact in our education system, but also beyond. So 2 things to consider with this. One, in many school districts, the people that work in the district don't necessarily live in the district, whenever all the students that go to that school live in the district. Right. So there's automatically one disconnect. Then on the other side, if we're doing just school, like you had mentioned before, this factory model of it, right? I myself am an example of an educator and a leader in a school district that has been in for 2 years and then gone, but never everyone else is still there. Yeah. So who are the leaders in the community who stay and are in that community, and how are they involved in such a way in this relationship reciprocated, where it doesn't matter if I am necessarily here or not, because we still have that collective impact as a whole within our community, because we have identified leaders that don't go anywhere. This is their life. This is their family. But it's going to be, the reality is that you're going to have someone who's going to grow in education, get this position and then that position, and then this district on the other side of the country calls them and they go. And I applaud them in doing so and helping and spreading their knowledge as well. Yeah. But what does that mean of what you left? Are you taking everything with you? Or do you already have it set up where you do have that collective impact? Right. But I think that the main thing, and really what I learned a lot from my research, I mean, overall is it's listening, of course, but it has to start with me. I have to be open-minded. I have to be willing. I have to be able to listen, and I have to have that desire to truly be of service, as opposed to being someone who just appoints an assignment, a standard, a faculty meeting, or whatever else that is and looks like.
Yeah, the conversation centers around kind of articulation between parents, families, and school.
And literally one of my findings.
Right. And expanding that concentric circle beyond that. There's a total siloing of schools and community. Okay, so I'm not talking about parents now. What about the mayor? What about the city council? What about the civic organizations? What about the Chamber of Commerce's? What about the businesses? They all have a stake in education. Nada.
Right. That goes back to that collective impact part too, right?
Right. Nothing, you know. And so why don't we not silo these institutions? They are part of the community. They are part of the education process. They are stakeholders.
Schools are producing them specifically.
Right. And but I have to say, kind of cynically, but maybe sometimes we don't want to hear from the community. You know, it's keep it away.
There are moments.
There are moments, right? But in an ideal world, I think that there needs to be kind of communication means between schools, like superintendent. And I grew up in a community where the savvy superintendents were part of the civic organization. I don't know, I call them civic organizations, the Kiwanis Club, for example, and the Rotary Club. And so the successful superintendents were very savvy. They went out and they were members of these organizations. They went out and participated in social events with them, and some of them even learned how to play golf and went out and played golf with them. And I think that those are some of the things that we need to humanize education and accept it. It's a community-wide effort. It's not just the school board, and it's not just the superintendent and the principals. Mm-hmm. So how do we do that? And should we just, things don't happen if you don't allocate time and money to them. Maybe we, just like we have parent liaisons, maybe we need to have a community liaison, and maybe we need to encourage members from the banking community, the real estate community, the grocery stores, the Chamber of Commerce's, to come to school once in a while, not just go knock on the door when you need $50 for a donation for
and
something.
Not just for the assembly that you're having.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. Right. I think that those are some of the things that would probably work. And, we're not talking just about the individual diverse, members of a diverse community. This would work basically for all kids. Yeah.
And we will be right back. Are you ready to take your K through 12 multilingual programs to new heights? Look no further than the experts at Kelly B's Consulting. We're not just consultants, we're partners in education, with a passion for empowering students and enriching your classrooms. At Kelly B's Consulting, we understand the unique cultural and linguistic needs of your diverse student population. Our team of experienced educators will work alongside you, tailoring strategies that transform your multilingual programs. Don't miss out on this opportunity. Visit www.kellybsconsultingllc.com today to learn more and schedule your consultation. Kelly B's Consulting, shaping the future of K through 12 multilingual education across the nation. Your success is our commitment. Contact us now and let's start building a brighter tomorrow together. And now, back to the show.
I do have a question for both of you guys. I think maybe switches conversation a little bit away from community and family. You, Kelly, talked about your grandmother and great-great-grandmother speaking German in the family. Growing up in the United States, going to school, I was not exposed to language to any major extent other than, having to take a language class in high school, and then spent so much time traveling, had wonderful opportunity to volunteer in multiple countries, but really struck in India with my time 6 months in India. On the side of the road, buying a banana, the guy would speak 5 languages,
mm-hmm.
And that really started to make me question why
right.
are we so English only, monolingual focused here in the United States? So my question is, based on both of your experiences and some of your experience internationally, Dr. Gómez, what have you learned about language acquisition of multiple languages that can be applied here within the United States? How can we do a better job? How can schools do a better job of recognizing the importance of bilingualism, multilingualism, and kind of with the mission of one of the main missions, Center of Applied Linguistics, promoting dual language education? What can schools do to help support that goal, even if they might not have, there are a lot of rural schools that don't necessarily have a great mix of diverse languages that to draw upon. What can schools do here in the United States to do a better job of mm-hmm. promoting important goal of being bilingual and multilingual?
Mm-hmm. Learning is not just an academic activity. It's a social, political activity also. And therefore, school values are a reflection of society's values and political values. And of course, political and social values kind of interplay, they play with one another, politics are part of your society, And I think that we gotta demonstrate value, for what we do in school. If there's a value, if there's a stated value, an accepted value, a desired value, a rewarded value, then this is America. if there's a rewarded value, and I'll give you an example of a rewarded value. The seal of biliteracy. Mm-hmm. That's a rewarded value. Parents know that it's very difficult getting into the University of Oklahoma.
And more difficult, University of Texas.
Right. So if the kids...
You've probably looked at his acceptance rates.
So if their child has in their transcripts that they have the seal of biliteracy, they may have a better chance of being admitted into William and Mary here in Virginia, for example, or the University of Virginia, or Harvard, or wherever. So I think that, and I think that placing a value, a reward on a skill, a knowledge, a substance of knowledge can help us get there. But if there's not a value that's a rewardable value, then it's probably we will continue to be doing what we're doing right now. And I think that right now, maybe 20% of kids in public schools are in world language classes. And that's pretty pathetic. Mm-hmm. In the other side of the ocean, it can be as high as 90%. Mm-hmm. And so we cannot demonstrate a need. We got to demonstrate a value, and it's happening with dual language programs. One of the issues we face with dual language programs is that many times the parents of the English speaker in a dual language program are stronger advocates of dual language programs than the parents of the kid that doesn't have English as a home language. So what I'm saying, Taylor, is that what do we do? I think we need to work on providing more value. So for example, if we start giving credit to kids that come to school with a language other than English, and make it easy for them to take a test and be given credit for it, maybe that's creating a value. Mm-hmm. Maybe having an honor given in the elementary grades. Maybe So I'm not even going into what we can do to have universities prepare teachers to be better at teaching world languages. I'm not going into state policies. I'm not going into the actual school district themselves. I think we invest a lot in world language education in this country. Whenever I talk about how we invest in world language, people many times disagree with me. They say, "Oh, we don't spend that much on world language." I said, "Sure we do." First of all, states typically have either have one person who's a state world language person. I know there's some. Some of them are world language, dual language, and ESL. But at the state level, there's already funding for a state person. There's funding for teachers. So how many school districts are in this country? I don't know. I forget the number. Maybe 10,000, or add another zero to it. And if you have
over 500. There are about 13,000 public school districts. So
13,000, and you say there's at least maybe 10 teachers per school average, could be more depending on the size. So if there's 13,000 times 10, that's 130,000.
Well, that's 13,000 school districts. So sure, yeah.
Times 10 teachers, That's 130,000 teachers. And think how much salary and benefits that you pay, and think of all of the books that you have to buy. We're spending maybe close to $1 billion or more on world language, but we're not getting the results. So we need to just maybe catch up with where we are contemporarily with having digital resources for world language education. Look at how we're teaching world languages. We don't need to go to Salamanca, Taylor, to learn Spanish.
I do.
Maybe we just need to become more familiar with our own neighborhoods and value that community by having our kids visit that part of your community and have home visits with those parents and reward those parents. So again, if the solution were easy, we wouldn't have a problem right now. But it really hasn't become better in the past, 10 years, 20 years. I just read this week that a university in West Virginia is canceling all of their world language programs. I'm not sure which university, and I won't say which university, but there's a university in West Virginia that says, hey, we just don't have the funding, and we want to be more focused with the resources we have and concentrate in areas that we feel have a higher priority than world language and linguistics. So there needs to have a lot of conversations, and the early discussion on communities to extend beyond the school district. I think that we need to involve the entire community at the national level at determining what priorities are. Yes. Because there are surveys that show that companies are going begging for folks that are bilingual to work with them.
Absolutely.
And also paying a higher premium to work with them. I mean, my daughter's an example. She's bilingual Spanish and English, and she was smart enough to develop those skills at the university level. And as a result, she got a good job with the State Department. And as a result of that, she was able to get a very fantastic job also with Amazon. And so bilingualism pays.
It does.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I always say I've never been to a job interview and they said, we'd love to hire you, but you're bilingual. That's never ever happened.
Never happened. No.
I think that, I heard someone say one time, this was years ago, I was at a conference and it's always stuck with me, but there was a gentleman who was from China, and he said that in the United States, it's the hardest place to teach English as an additional language. And you think for a minute, why would that be? But whenever you consider, like you were saying, on the other side of the ocean, people are learning multiple languages, therefore have a closer relationship and connection to the benefits of being multilingual and even language acquisition and things of that nature versus the United States, and kind of considering the fact of the impact of that English as a language that is economically benefiting the United States based on relationships with even other countries. So whenever that becomes a very dominant language, then that kind of takes over, unfortunately. And so you were talking about putting value on it. And I think that like on one side, there's that value that I guess society has deemed that English is going to be that mode of communication because it breaks the economy, right? Without understanding about there are so many other languages that could still be utilized, but it made sense to me why it would be so difficult here and not as difficult in other countries. But then that value, right? And so the value that we've been talking about has been extrinsic up to this point. The syllabi literacy, you're going to get a scholarship, you might get more money in your job, et cetera. But what about that intrinsic motivation? And so whenever I was learning Spanish, for example, I was 15 years old. I had an amazing teacher, Senora Atkins, and I just fell in love with her. And I thought that she was an awesome teacher, and I thought I really liked this content. And then through that, though, what ended up happening is that I wanted to know more people. I wanted to know more culture. I wanted to know more things. And that was my intrinsic motivation, wanting to be able to learn a language, to be able, because I knew that I needed to know that language to be able to know these other cultures and traditions and other people in a way that I wanted to know. No one was telling me. No one else in my family speaks Spanish. I'm the only one. So it was something that was very just personal for me in that process.
Yeah. I think the intrinsic part is at the heart of education. The National Academy of Sciences has a study called How People Learn. And the report focuses on motivation. And it focuses on, it touches on, I don't say if it focuses on, but it focuses on a lot of stuff. But it does talk about motivation. It talks about extrinsic motivation. It talks about intrinsic motivation. And how to develop what it looks like, and how important it is in education, and how it also talks about the funds of knowledge, accepting what students can contribute, providing students choice in how they approach a course in a project and an assignment. So intrinsic motivation is very much a part of that contributes to higher academic achievement, and it is not happening. But so that's kind of like that part. I attended a session once, or read an article or a TED Talk, one of those things, and the question centered around, why is the U.S. more competitive? What makes the U.S. more competitive than other countries? China, Japan, Saudi Arabia, England. What makes the U.S. more competitive? And so people were saying, it's ability, because we have more scientists, because we have more engineers. Because we have all the great science infrastructure, and the answer was no. Right. What makes the U.S. more competitive? It's the ability of the education system to focus on producing creative people. So. We think of other countries that have a national form of education that's a little bit more templated than it is in the United States. A methodology, a pedagogy that is more templated. This is the way you do things. It's more hierarchical. The teacher knows, the students don't. It's more rote. It's more memorization. It's you need to know this before you can graduate. And so the sad thing is that this country is moving away from focusing on creativity in the schools and moving in the direction of what the other countries are doing. And that's that involves languages also, intrinsically, I learned this from my grandmother. I have a love for literature, for the literary arts. Because folk tales are an oral expression of literary art. Just think the Cervantes experience, Pedro de Urdemales, So I feel sad. Sometimes I really feel sad and frustrated that I can't share with my monolingual English speakers the joy that's out there to get from reading the works of South American poetesses, for example, Juana de Ibarburo, for example, and there's several Nobel Prize winners in literature in South America, women, Nobel Prize winners. No one knows about them, and their stuff is enjoyable. It's just like. I think it was Juana de Ibarburo who wrote a poem called The Fig Tree.
Yeah.
And the fig tree is, oh my gosh, it is just so great. So the storyline for the fig tree is that there's a finca, a farm, and it's owned by a woman, and the woman strolls down through her orchard, her trees, peach trees, apple trees, and a fig tree. And she comes to the fig tree and looks at the fig tree, and she contemplates, and she says to the fig tree, of all of the trees in my orchard, you're the most beautiful and the one that produces the best fruit. And then the breeze comes by and asks the fig tree, so how was your day? She said, oh, it was great. The owner of the farm came by and said that I am the most beautiful tree in her orchard, And think about what it means to, the idea of diversity and equity and all kinds of stuff. And my monolingual English-speaking friends can't read that. It's terrible.
Well, I think both of your examples are bringing up a point that's, I think, important to remember when it comes to people of your intellects versus the masses. So you guys had your own intrinsic motivation and interests that propelled you to learn the things that you've learned, you learning Spanish. Whereas I think I am more intrinsically motivated by situational necessity. So, I don't know that I failed Spanish in high school. I didn't really care that much about it. The only thing I cared about, I remember reading in my Spanish textbook about the Pan American Highway, going all the way from the United States down to Panama. And I was like, I want it.
It probably went.
I'm an adventurer. I was like, I want to travel that highway. And so I hitchhiked later on all the way from Oklahoma to Panama and back.
Wow.
And that's where I learned my Spanish. And it was a necessity. I needed to communicate. And so I don't know how we do this, but I consider myself more like the masses. We're not going to find a lot of people like you guys that are just intrinsically motivated to learn this stuff.
Yeah.
How do we create, and I don't know what the answer is, how do we create that intrinsic necessity? I had to learn. How do we push people out into experiences that are not all that comfortable, where they have to learn language? Because we know it's important, we know it's valuable, but so many of us, like myself, won't learn it unless they're forced to learn it. How do we create those situations where students have to learn it?
Mm-hmm. Well, like I said, if we had the answer to that, we wouldn't have the problem we have now.
Right.
But again, let's develop a content-based second language arts curriculum.
Yes.
It's you just don't go in so that this entire year we're going to learn por and para and the present tense. Who in the world spends 1 year speaking in the present tense, for example?
Nobody.
I know that that's an exaggeration. I'm not belittling world language teachers, but we are our narrative about society hasn't kept up with the demographics.
Exactly.
In Texas, only about 27% of the kids are white English speakers. Think about that.
Yeah, let that sink in.
And that's according to the state records, But if we think about it in society, the Dallas Cowboys, the University of Texas, John Wayne, Cowboys, Austin, Texas, But that narrative hasn't kept up with the demographics. And so when we try to teach a world language like it's still 1940 or 1950, and we're not dealing with the real demographics, then we're out of sync. And so that's what I'm saying. How about if we develop second language arts curriculum that's content based, so that you're not learning about bullfights, and piñatas, that you're learning, that you're aligning the content in your world language in science and math and social studies with your courses in social science and content, so that then one reinforces the other, maybe, and I've lived, I've had that experience. When I was in Texas many years ago, there was a very enlightened director for bilingual ed that had aligned the standard at the state level, the English language arts standards with the Spanish language arts standards, for example, with the content standards, and they were aligned, and it was wonderful. It could be done, but we really don't have those kind of efforts that are going on right now.
I think that needs to be an effort that goes on right now, because going back to the point that you were talking about is that you had situational need for learning a language, acquiring language. There was some intrinsic motivation on our end, maybe over here. But I also think about just having recently, back in June, having participated in the National Convening for English Learner Civil Rights, and hearing somebody that was from, and I may misspeak, but I'm 99% sure I'm not, from Oregon, saying that in Oregon that they're changing even their requirements for their language arts assessment that can be in any language, I guess within a group of languages that are available to them. But the point is that they can take their language arts assessment in that language because they're assessing the standard and not the English language, which I think is a great step in the direction of going back to what you had mentioned that I also experienced in supporting schools and developing and implementing dual language programs, is that sometimes you do have the native English speaking families promoting it more than the native Spanish, Mandarin, French, etc. speaking families. And I think a lot of that comes back to, one, there are requirements that are already set in English only, which therefore makes the population that is speaking a language other than English worry that I'm not going to have success for my child. So therefore, let's leave our heritage, our culture, and our language so we can have success here. Whenever that's a fault of the education system that needs to be and can be corrected, right? But then you also have, and I was talking just yesterday with Dr. Jose Viana about this, working in school districts, and it's very rare to ever find cabinet level leadership that is reflective of language and of culture and of tradition of those being served in the schools. And I feel like if there's just a great opportunity for the education system to have leadership that looks and sounds like those being served and can have this type of more broader, open-minded way of thinking, to be culturally proficient, the best that they can, to listen and to learn, and to also create avenues where assessments don't have to be in one language or the other, because we want that whole child to come. And if we could be more aware of what those barriers are and break those down, I think it would therefore lead into answering, not the silver bullet again, but lead into answering your question of how do we make it more accessible for all students? Well, if we can get rid of the limitations of English only, imagine the world and the wealth of knowledge that could be learned and acquired through language, culture, and content that goes way beyond the borders of just this country itself, and even beyond our neighborhoods.
So again, the siloing of languages, for example, English, Spanish, Chinese, the further siloing of languages, American English, British English, standardized, Colombian Spanish, Argentine Spanish. We speak the real Spanish. You don't speak the real Spanish. British English is better than American English, and we create silos, but we don't focus on the Venn diagram on the intersects. Kids come to school without any academic formal knowledge Joel Gómez's grandmother didn't speak English and didn't speak, the kid is 5 years old and we have to start from scratch. So we focus on
all your
academic language. We have to start from scratch. Joel Gómez knew how to explain just from dealing with her grandmother. And so does every kid that doesn't speak English that goes to school.
Mm-hmm.
And every kid that goes to school already know English speakers also. They know how to explain. They know how to describe. They know how to narrate. They know how to evaluate. They know how to persuade. A 2-year-old knows how to persuade. No, I don't want that. It's mine. No, I don't want yogurt. I want cereal. I mean, kids come to school with language abilities like narration. Let me tell you what I did with Johnny at in recess today, or what Pedro and I did. That's narration. Let me tell you what I did. Let me tell you how to do it. Let me tell you what I want. Educators say we have to start from scratch because they don't know academic language. Yeah. What in the world is description, narration, evaluation, explanation skills, and why don't we build on them? And why do we think that we have to start that again when kids already know that in English and are trying to learn Spanish?
We have a very limited view.
Right.
What you're talking about reminds me of my oldest daughter had to take WIDA language proficiency exam. Her mother's a Farsi speaker.
Right.
And so she goes to school, kindergarten, has to take the WIDA test, and they tell her the story and ask her to explain what happened. And she said, "That story is boring. I'm going to tell you a better story." And she told a whole separate story, but they gave her a bad score because it wasn't on topic.
Right. Yeah. Right. So those are some of the things that unfortunately are happens when we're dealing with language instruction, or even instructing kids in a dual language program. We just neglect the fact that what we call academic English really is just part of language communication skills that people learn outside of school also. Like I said.
In multiple languages, in multiple ways.
Persuasion.
Mm-hmm. Oh, kids know persuasion.
I know. So how do we tap into that body of knowledge and focus it on a topic dealing with social studies with democracy, for example? Talk about democracy. Talk about civil rights, because the kid can already has that capacity. Just let them know that they have it and tap into it.
In the last podcast, there was a great conversation that we also had, and I mentioned this, and I just want to mention it again, because I feel like it really relates to what we're talking about. The best level of education that I ever received is from my students. Whenever I taught as a newcomer teacher, 6th to 8th grade, 7 countries, 8 languages represented, and our producer, Mike Overholt, we always joke because I always feel like I have to bring them up in every episode, but they just come up because I remember that very first class and those students and how much they taught me. And so I feel like overall, if we would take more time to learn from our students, because we as the adults, sure, we have our experiences, our backgrounds, and we, our knowledge that we're trying to, help and support and serve, etc. But if you really want to know, listen to your students, listen to them, learn about them. And I want to do a quick shout out because this was in my dissertation from the Center for Applied Linguistics. Is an article by Beatriz Arias.
Yes.
And that just came out, and it's titled "Turning Toward Asset-Based Pedagogies."
Right.
And so if listeners, if you want to read a great article, I recommend you looking that up again. Again, it's "Turning Toward Asset-Based Pedagogies" by Beatriz Arias. And it really does speak to what we're talking about right now.
Yeah.
And there's more even beyond that, because that could be a dissertation in and of itself. But I just really want to highlight the importance again of learning from our students. Mm-hmm. And the more that we can take our own knowledge and do a little, flip-flop reverse on this and take our background knowledge and assume that the student is now the teacher. Imagine how much more we could learn and how much more that would embrace communities and families and cultures and traditions and identities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. Yeah, asset-based education, and that's very central to one of the topics that we deal with in the U.S. in educating kids that have a language other than English at home. And the idea of giving them the ability to speak a second language and striving towards native language ability. Well, the idea of a native language, if Taylor's home language is English, that's your native language because it's inherent in the word native. I can never join you in your growing up experiences. Taylor is an English speaker because, my ability to speak in English is connected to my historical existence. I grew up with certain experiences that relate to English and Spanish. You grew up with historical experiences dealing with mostly monolingual experiences. So when I describe something, when I express something, it's going to tap not into my full linguistic repertoire, as we say now, but it's going to tap into my full life experiences repertoire, right? And so native English speakers may say, "Oh, that's a funny way of expressing that. I never thought of that," And so therefore, it makes me a non-native English speaker, and that's bad because you're almost a native English speaker, but there's something a little bit different still,
We create too many standards for us.
No, but you'll never be two native English speakers.
Right.
I mean, you'll never be two native language speakers.
We're both native English speakers and we speak very differently.
Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, this is one of my topics, I'll just speak about Spanish speakers in this country. So we get it from both sides. Almost a native English speaker. What? Oh, you only spoke up, you grew up speaking only Spanish. Oh, that's very good. You're almost a native speaker of English. I go to Mexico City or I go to Buenos Aires or Quito, and your Spanish is really good. It's all.
Do you say yours also?
Yeah, right. I studied Spanish at the graduate level, at the doctoral level, but it's not that quite. You're a little bit different. It's el español de los gringos. So that's terrible. Yeah. So the fact is, the shout out for me is that we value English and we value Spanish. But we hardly ever tell a kid, it's so fantastic to be bilingual.
It's a superpower.
It's a superpower. Yes, exactly. But we hardly ever value the bilingual part. We value the monolingual part. You speak good English. You speak excellent Spanish.
That's a really good point.
But we don't say you're the Venn diagram. You connect one language body of knowledge and culture with another. You're the translator. You're the articulator. You're the part that creates new things, fusion food, fusion literature that creates new things for the future. And we don't have a grade equivalent of WIDA for bilingualism. Maybe, the seal of biliteracy gets us there. And we don't have, we give kids a grade for their world language scores for English, but But it's important to realize, and for teachers and educators and parents to realize that, heck, being bilingual gives us tremendous advantages because I can bridge both worlds and I can come up with stuff that you can't think of as a monolingual.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
1,000%. And it even forms different ways of thinking.
Right. And so it's so terrible for my Spanish-speaking colleagues from other countries who come and say, your Spanish is not the good. And it's even worse when there's programs in high school that says, we don't want to have Spanish speakers because their Spanish is not, okay. And it interferes with kids that are trying to learn good Spanish, formal Spanish. Yeah. So those are things also that if kids wake up in the morning wanting to go to school, that can make a kid not want to go to school.
Exactly. If anyone's listening and you are bilingual, multilingual, you do have a superpower, and embrace it and lean into it and share it and accept it and love it.
And educators need to accept it and embrace it also.
Exactly.
And reward it. Yeah. Because that's the way it is.
Dr. Gómez, I feel like I could really sit here all day and chat with you. And I just want to say thank you so much for the time that you have spent with us and for sharing so many wonderful topics and really good points of view with all of us today. Is there anything that you would like to leave us with?
Well, I had a list of about 15 things we could talk about. We got to talk about 2 things.
We'll have to be doing part 2 and 3 and 4, right?
Exactly.
I would love to invite you for a part 2.
Maybe next time I will assume the role of a raconteur and tell you one of my folk tales.
Yeah.
And leave you hanging by saying, like I've done in some workshops.
A continuación.
I says, so we're getting to the end of this folktale. So if I hadn't kept my Spanish, you wouldn't know what happened to Lisa. So did Lisa find the prince? Did the prince drink the chocolate that was made by the different suitors that were going to marry him?
Pues ahora quiero saber.
What happened? Did they live happily ever after? If I hadn't continued with my Spanish ability, you would know, and I'm not going to tell you. Tell me.
That's right. That's what makes all the good TV shows. To keep on having one series after another. You keep wanting to come back for more.
Just promise you'll tell us next time about Luisa, okay?
Yeah, I will tell you about Lisa. Yes. Yeah.
Well, in all honesty and with all due respect, I'm so thankful that I was able to even learn more from you today and just gather insight from you. And so thank you. Thank you so much for this conversation. Thank you for all of your service in the field of education, bilingual and multilingual education. And so I just wish you all the best. And again, thank you for helping educate myself as well as all of the listeners and sharing these connections to culture and talking about how important all of this truly is. Also, a big thank you to co-host Dr. Jeffrey Taylor Trimble. So glad that you were with us today.
Yep.
And also to our producer, Mike Overholt. Listeners, thank you so much. I hope that you have a fantastic rest of your day. And thank you for making some cultural connections with us. We love you and talk to you soon. Adios.
Adios.
Thank you for joining us today. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe. Adios.